by 2030, we all know that thermal power plants are not going to get added in India. There's so much of resistance that in Delhi, you might be knowing that out of 11 thermal power plants in the NCR region, in the last 3 months, only 5 of them have been made to operate. So with that kind of resistance, leave about addition in the thermal capacity, it is only going to reduce by the time we reach 2030. So today it is just a problem of the same level of demand and thermal capacity and renewable just trying to add the balancing role. But when we will reach to 2030, unless and until renewable picks up between this period and 2030, and we don't know how to integrate this renewable with the rest of the grid, we are going into a big, I would say, energy crisis.
In the best interest of time, I'll quickly begin. Welcome to the Blue Circle. It's such a big privilege and pleasure to reconnect with everyone and our distinguished panelists who are handpicked because of the think input and the rich experience they bring in. And thank you to our distinguished audience for joining us, most of whom are CEOs and CXOs and senior leaders. Many of them are our members and are repeat visitors to our webinar. Very encouraging and motivates us to provide even higher levels of dialogue through the online mode as well. And for those of you who are new with us today, Blue Circle is the world's first sector-specific networking app for business leaders that's built in India. We currently focus on 20 sector communities such as energy, e-mobility, real estate, hospitality and tourism, logistics, and many more. We also present socioeconomic insights which ultimately determine the evolving complexion of the market. Along with our weekly webinar series and our digital publication, you will be happy to know that we have recently launched the first version of the Blue Circle app for leaders, somewhat like the sector-specific LinkedIn for leaders, a space to have meaningful conversations, connect with close to 10,000 like-minded leaders from India and across the globe, house high-quality curated content, and access business opportunities across these sectors. Those leaders among you who are interested, please do join us. I will share the link to the app in the chat section. I will soon be sending invitations to our new guests. And today we are privileged to have big minds and leading thinkers of the industry join in for our energy discussion. And the topic for today's session is, what does the energy crisis tell the renewable sector? Just in the best interest of time, I'll quickly briefly mention the names and designation of our panelists. We have with us Mr. Kapil Maheshwari, President Renewable Energy Development of Reliance Industries, Mr. Parag Sharma, Founder and CEO O2 Power, and our chair and moderator for today's session is Mr. Ashish Kulkarni, Associate Partner, EY. And I request Mr. Kulkarni to please chair and moderate the session. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Gautam and the Blue Circle for having invited us, and a warm welcome to both Kapil and Parag on this panel. And it is great pleasure to always reach out to you guys and speak on such a pertinent subject, and brainstorm on certain aspects that can be taken forward by Blue Circle to the government and the larger stakeholder in the community, because this is something that will keep affecting our lives, and hence I think bringing a perspective and bringing solutions to something in the future is something that we can deliberate on, and that's something I want to begin with. That is the intent. First of all, I think on the energy crisis itself, we all know that India faced the coal shortage in the month of October, and till date we are still resolving to get to the we are playing the catch-up game to get to that 18-day reserve coal required. We are still at around 8 to 10 days, and there is a dip in temperature that will also and I mean we'll see that in the northern regional grids, we will see that there will be more peak demand required during the day, and that's again going to circle back to all of these aspects. And primarily, I think from a perspective of why it happened. We all know that the prolongated monsoons were something that were the reasons behind that. And although there needs to be a proper planning, and I think the government is doing whatever it should be doing, probably. I think there are certain elements that we can take forward, going forward into where we are. Post COP26, I think there is a lot of emphasis on how we as a nation are going to go forward, and there is 500 gigawatts which has been already announced, and we are going to be net zero emissions as a country by 2070, and that's a big move from where we started the COP26 and where we ended in, and that's also provides for a clear path as to how the nation, both the public sector as the private sector, needs to take forward this agenda. So from that perspective, I'll stop there. I just wanted to have some views about what you think on the energy crisis, and what your opinions and what are the key takeaways from what you hear from the industries, from your connects with the industries. What are the things that your thoughts are for the future on how it should not happen again, and B, from the perspective of a player, stakeholder in the next generation grids, is something that this comes to the forefront, that if something that like this happens, then how will the grid, and what will be the effect for you as a key stakeholder who is providing renewable energy as well as energy in general for the future. So I would invite Kapil to begin with, and then Parag to follow, and then we can have a discussion on this particular topic. Yeah. Over to you, Kapil.
Thanks, Ashish. I mean, Ashish raised a very relevant point on, why this whole crisis happened in October. So let me just tell that, maybe the talk was that we were running with a 2 to 3 days of coal at that point of time, which at this moment could be 6 to 10 days. And possibly for us to, program power from the thermal power plants, which is where our country's peak power demand is to be met, should be around 16 to 20 days. So we should have all these thermal power producers or independent power producers who run large scale ultra thermal power plants, possibly 600 megawatt plus kind of units, should have coal reserves or tie-ups, and some way forward to get it for 16 to 20 days, so that these things don't occur whenever we see in the next time. So first of all, we also need to see, before we speak on other aspects, is how can we avoid it in future? And as our demands are only gonna go up, now what are the drivers which will cause the demand to go up? We all know industrialization would be one of that. We all know that ESG thing which is happening across industries. So everyone is so focused on now the whole environmental aspect, including social and governance, of course, because of which they would be seeing that the electricity demand, and particularly for them, then possibly lesser carbon kind of an electricity would be the way forward for them. So these are things which are going to drive the thing forward. So given that aspect happening, so we now really need to see this climate risk is going to continue for a while. We have seen it. We have seen extended monsoons. We have seen tornadoes. We have seen cyclones. And I would say maybe possibly we are one of those, in the larger nations, we are one of those lucky ones who has yet not seen the extreme situation. The Western world has seen possibly more adverse impacts of climate change than possibly India has encountered, at least in last decade or so. They have seen very, very high temperature in very cold regions, But India also has seen, the frequency of cyclones have changed. Now, all of these climate risks would continue even wherever we go and whatever we do. That's beyond us. How do we control at this moment till we seriously address the climate change? And addressing climate change right now is a very, very long-term solution. Whatever we start doing today, and whatever Ashish just mentioned in COP26, the whole issue of phasing down or phasing out versus, when do we see, we never went with an intent of declaring us as net carbon zero by 2070. That was an a pleasant surprise for almost everyone who is in this sector, or possibly who looks and takes care of the environment. But given all these things, how some aspects needs to come out now. How do we mitigate all of this? Now, one of the things which everyone thinks is that if we are talking of phasing out also, or phasing down, whatever it is, it's an increased role of renewable power share in the whole electricity or the whole energy sector. Now, even when that is happening, are they not prone to the whole climate risk? Even in solar power plant, can a gust of wind could cause damage to a solar power plant, or in cyclone as well. We have all seen, even in wind power plants, there are years where the PLFs have gone down substantially. So even climate risk exists even with the renewable power plants. So we will keep on encountering, even when we are trying to reshuffle the way we see our energy mix. So while we have all said that 500 gigawatt of non-fossil fuel, and that's a little bit of change, the way it was addressed before and now, it was 450 megawatt of renewable, and now it is addressed as 450 gigawatt of renewables, and now it is addressed as 500 gigawatt by 2030 of non-fossil. So possibly nuclear, or possibly maybe hydropower plants also would be the part of story. Now, if we have to reach even to that stage of 500 gigawatt, which is roughly 50% of your energy mix. Now, let me say it's not the power mix, it's now the energy mix is being spoken. So 50% of all the units what you consume in the country is non-fossil fuel. And possibly it is, it could be even more, by in next couple of years, given that the agenda of ESG and the way countries promoting policies for net zero and decarbonization, and even outside world as well. I feel not only in India, but globally, that could be the scenario. But as I said, the climate risk would continue. We still want that out of the whole energy mix, the end user should be benefited. Now, the end user should get the lowest cost of power. Now, we are running at a place where everything else is, the cost of producing power is increasing, but at the same time, because we are talking of more non-carbon, carbon-free, all of those kind of power, and at the same time, we still want to satisfy the end user with the lowest cost of power. So if that needs to happen, we really need to see how do we manage the whole power mix between the renewable power plant and the thermal power plant. So one of the initiative what Ministry of New and Renewable Energy, Ministry of Power and SECI has taken is the bid which has come out, which is thermal plus renewable. So they've mixed, and then it gives a breather for both existing thermal power plants which are facing problems of coal shortage, which are facing problems of curtailment, which are facing problems that they are not able to provide the power when they are able to run the plant. And the PLFs have gone down from 80-90% to, in some of those plants, to 40-50% as well. So this whole thing can provide a relief to those kind of power plants with the renewable capacity addition as well. So one of that initiative is this. So we really need to think of multiple such initiatives, which as a country we need to take, and not as in state specific things. Because if the grid would be so big, now we are talking, our Prime Minister is saying one grid, one power, all of those concepts, and we are talking of supplying power from India to neighboring nations. We're already doing it to Nepal, Bangladesh, etc. And possibly one of the way to handle whenever the surplus power exists because of renewable, to export that power to, if it is one grid, then to neighboring nations, etc. as well. So given all of that is happening, we now need to see what are the other ways. One of the way I spoke is thermal plus renewable. What are the other ways where we could do? So the whole analysis, what we need to do is now not on the production side or the generation side. I feel now what we need to do analysis is on the demand supply side. That how do I manage my supply according to my demand, so that I'm able to manage all these power plants and shift from one to the other according to seasons, according to demand, according to day and night, and the variability of the power what it generates. So this whole concept of how do we manage the demand supply properly would actually cause what Ashish just said, and multiple things emerging out of that would be some new kind of business models which are coming. Could possibly be the virtual power plant or virtual PPAs which are happening. Then daytime ahead markets for renewables which is coming. So as to manage this whole intermittency or the variability in the way renewable power is generated. Another way to look at it would be how do renewable power supply and becomes more dispatchable. So we can see that the peak power load or the peak power demand side can also be satisfied with renewable. That's only possible, we all know, in some or the other shape, renewable can be added to storage. So that's one aspect of it. We really need to look at it very seriously. So those are some of those initial thoughts, Ashish. I want to put it.
That's really exciting to hear, Kapil, from you on the on 2-3 aspects, and we'll come back to it from the perspective of the power markets, day-ahead markets, virtual power plants, and role of technology. We'll come back to that. And also, you mentioned a really critical element of climate risks, which is both for thermal as well as RE. One of the key things was the elongated monsoons, and I really feel that these climate risks will, because so much of investments is happening across renewable energy. These are also assets which are for the long run that we are creating, and those also need to be protected against the climate change and all the climate risks, definitely. So very good points, and thank you so much for your opening remarks. I would now invite Parag. Parag, you've been kind enough, patient enough. Please do let us know your thoughts on how you think, what are the learnings from the energy crisis, and then what is that you see in the future from your perspective, being a pure play renewable energy player, and being somebody who sees this day in and day out, panning out from from a sort of driver's seat. Parag, over to you, and let us know your thoughts. Yeah.
Thanks, Ashish, and thanks, Blue Circle, for inviting me here. So the way I see is that India is about to face a very steep or very big energy crisis. And what we have seen in October was more of a minor issue, I would say, where thermal power plants were not maintaining reserves, and suddenly the demand increased, and which led to a bit of a crisis. But the bigger picture, if you see today, is we have 200 to 210 gigawatt of peak demand in the country. And similar is the size of a thermal installed capacity in India. And that's why we are largely able to meet this peak demand with bit of a support from renewables. And that's why renewable is only just 10% of our entire energy mix. So this is the current situation, and still we are able to maintain the grid. But look at the situation in 2030, when the CA is projecting that the peak demand in India would be 310 gigawatts. And by 2030, we all know that thermal power plants are not going to get added in India. There's so much of resistance that in Delhi, you might be knowing that out of 11 thermal power plants in the NCR region, in the last 3 months, only 5 of them have been made to operate. So with that kind of resistance, leave about addition in the thermal capacity, it is only going to reduce by the time we reach 2030. So today it is just a problem of the same level of demand and thermal capacity and renewable just trying to add the balancing role. But when we will reach to 2030, unless and until renewable picks up between this period and 2030, and we don't know how to integrate this renewable with the rest of the grid, we are going into a big, I would say, energy crisis. That is where I believe a lot needs to be done. So the real problem we as an IPPC is old way of thinking, I would say, from DISCOM side. They believe that they have a regulatory target to meet RPO, whatever in some state it might be 7%, some state might be 14%. It is separately defined for wind and solar. And they just target that number and try procuring renewables to that limit. That also very few states have been able to meet. Most of them are missing it. So they are not thinking about the bigger picture. They are not planning for the future. They're not thinking that how will I really get the power in a crisis situation which happened in October. So I don't see that thing being addressed by the DISCOM's planning department or the procurement team. We see today almost 18 to 20 gigawatt of PPAs, renewable PPAs, which were bid out by entities like SECI, NTPC, NSPC, not getting any off-taker. They're not getting signed. Multiple reasons for the same. But what central government is not able to push through is an off-take, despite we knowing that we need power. And as Kapil mentioned, there's no reason why peak demand will not continue increasing at 10%, which it has increased over the last 1 year. Despite that, despite most of the people knowing about it, we don't see DISCOMs procuring renewable power, and they somehow are just limited in their thoughts on the RPO requirement. So that significant shift is required. That is point number one. What more is required is the change in the market design. So today, if we see any solar plant getting added in US, there is a 50% probability that it will also have a storage with it. And that's what the entire data of connectivity queue of US shows, that every second solar plant has a storage attached to it. And why is it so? Because the market has so many different ways of monetizing the storage component. You can have a peaking power, you can have a non-peaking power, you can sell it in the ancillary market. The difference in the price during the day is of 7x, 8x. While what we see in India, the difference in the price during the day is just 3x, 4x. Not much incentive for anyone to have to convert its infirm power into firm power. Ancillary services market is only at the interstate level. I can't see why it is taking so much of time to develop the market. At the state level, a lot of states are paying almost 2 crores per month of penalty on DSM. A lot of states are backing down their renewables, trying to manage within their state. So these are clear lacunas in our design structure. Why are we not moving to the regional dispatch system, if not the central? Why are we limiting the whole demand management at a micro level, at a state level? So a big change is required in the regulatory environment in India. And the lastly, and government has slightly woken up now in the last few months, is the energy storage. Hardly any energy storage in India. I think the commissioned energy storage is just 25 megawatt of storage plant done by AES free of cost for Delhi. Other than that, there is no storage plant for India. So ESS is something which is definitely required once we are moving from 10% of renewable mix to somewhere around 25% of renewable mix in the next 7-8 years. So I would stop here. So there are many of such things which are required to be done. if they are not getting addressed over the next couple of years, I see India really going into a deep energy crisis.
No, thank you, Parag. Very relevant observations, and obviously from the perspective of new markets and new markets which are going to emerge, is something that Kapil also touched. From a perspective of looking at demand rather than only the supply side, and understanding the peaks and troughs of each state, to understand what is the kind of load profile each state has got, and understanding how much of penalty just from deviation settlements we are passing it on from one state to others. Because what is happening is the same thing can be actually invested in larger storage plants, which can then basically be used either to provide inwards into for the interstate or interstate as well. So flexibility, both in terms of the grids and flexibility in terms of how we are going to supply. I think these are the both and the pricing, of course. It is all interrelated, and all of these three need to come in for providing the customers the best value, as Kapil was mentioning. I think all of these aspects are really important. On the regulations, markets. Obviously, we are seeing that the green day-ahead markets are coming in. So more and more, we are looking at least from a supply side, we are looking at flexibility in providing that from a market perspective. But from the aspect of curtailment and aspect of the DISCOMs wanting to take in the relevant RPO obligations, that is again something that the penalty side of things need to also pitch in at some point in time. The mandation and the penalty side of things to go into a situation where the need, or the exact word offtake, which you mentioned, Parag, that will come from more from a mandation point of view, be it for and we are just talking about electricity here, but it is going to be needed for even energy on the whole. So even if the nation is moving towards green hydrogen, then that is also something that there will be need for a mandation kind of thing. So we have set the target. We need that mandation. We need the penalty structures. Or if you don't have if you don't want a penalty structure, probably you need to create a fund, probably at a state level or at a central level, which can actually act as a chest for developing these markets to a certain extent for the next 2-3 years, so that we avoid those crises. I'll stop here, but there is a huge role in which innovation or technologies. BESS is one technology, but there are many new technologies and new aspects like and Kapil touched about it on virtual power plants for the flexibility, to bring in that flexibility. What are your views, Parag, on how you see from the technology and from the digital side? Is there AI which is going to come in so that we can manage this crisis a little better? What are the key levers required on that front, which can be taken forward by the government and the public, both public and private? And I'll come back to you, Kapil, with the same question post Parag.
Right. So, Ashish, AI and digital is a name which can be, and these can be used across the entire power sector value chain. And if I start at one end, let's say we running our renewable plants, and if we talk about wind plants, in our organization, we have seen that if we really do the wind monitoring properly, there is a significant improvement in the generation. Similarly, and all this leads to, all this can be done only when you use advanced artificial intelligence tools. So one segment where there would be a meaty output would be the way we are operating our plants. And if we have a better remote monitoring, if we have a better monitoring of turbines, all that might lead to a lesser O&M cost. And if you see internationally, hardly 1 or 2 people maintaining a 200 to 300 megawatt power plants. So that is one angle, that you will reduce the tariff, you will reduce the O&M cost by using these digital means. And that goes without saying, it is already happening in India. If you see the O&M cost of a solar plant last 4 or 5 years, it would have reduced to hardly 50%. Lot comes because of scale, but lot also is coming from these artificial intelligence tools. But that is only one leg of the whole value chain. I think the bigger use of AI or these tools can be they helping DISCOMs do better demand planning. And that is where we really see a gap. We see that they have SLDCs, and a lot of SLDCs have been digitalized, and lot of schemes have been run around it. But yes, there's a huge scope of improvement at the state level. We all know the efficiencies at the state level. Until the time the whole thing doesn't get privatized, at least the schemes from PFCs and RECs can help these states go digitalize or go towards the digital way and optimize the way they are at least procuring power, if at least that part can be addressed. In fact, if you see the amendments in the Act, they are talking about NRLDCs or NLDCs or the regional load dispatch centers having control on the SLDCs in a convoluted way. And that also might be one way to at least automize or address the problems in a faster way. Because DISCOM's privatization and then be improving upon the load dispatch centers is a long journey. Maybe if you route it through the central route, that might be faster. And this whole thing can go on the manufacturing side. Kapil might be knowing better how we can use these digital and the AI tool. Coming to the virtual power plant, which you mentioned. So I see a big opportunity there. We see our neighboring countries like Singapore, they don't have land. And while there are so many corporates looking to offset their carbons. So this whole concept of virtual power plant, where countries like India set up a power plant, a renewable power plant, they sell physical power to the exchange as a brown power. And then the environmental attributes can be sold to these corporates who are largely in countries where there is a land restriction. And in multiple ways, even for India also, we all know that some states have banking, but banking doesn't allow you to replace 100% of your renewable power. It has restrictions on monthly banking to time of the day banking. And you end up replacing only 70% to 80%, or sometimes in some states, even lesser amount of power. And this is all about those corporates who have mandate to replace 100% of their power. So the remaining energy can be replaced by buying attributes, green attributes from so-called virtual power plants. So there could be multiple things which can be done on the back of virtual power plant. And this concept will soon really take place in India. There are some restrictions like our RE 100 doesn't allow IREX to be sold from one country to another. It needs some specific approval. So once all these small nuances gets addressed, it will be a very smooth sailing for a renewable power plant in India. They just connect to exchange, sell power, physical power, try to get extra monetization by selling the renewable components. And that obviously will boost the megawatt capacity addition in the country. We are talking about adding 45 gigawatt. We haven't done any year more than 15 gigawatt. So it needs a real push, and that push will come from things like virtual power plant, things like what recently government has done on open access by waiving the open access charges even for customer, the things like green hydrogen. So I think if we have to reach closer to 45 gigawatt, all these things will really be helpful for the country.
Thank you so much, Parag. I think very valid points again, and especially with regards to the what needs to happen on the DISCOM side on the planning aspects. I think for that, especially there are that's where the entire forecasting and the load balancing needs to happen at that level. Needs to we need to understand better the demand profiles of all the customers. That's exactly where we come from, and the role of VPPs and digital AI definitely both at the plant level as well as the RLDC level is very important to offtake wherever renewable energy, whether it's distributed or not, because there is a role which will be envisaged from the perspective of batteries coming in, right? So there is e-mobility coming in, and then there are aspects of vehicle to grid which also needs to be taken into consideration when the DISCOMs have a role to play. So as I said, if that balancing can happen at a state level, we're taking into consideration all the interventions, and those again, as you rightly mentioned, from the VPP point of view, we do know that Article 6 is going to be reality very soon, and the bilateral trading between countries is something that will happen in the near future, and that's an ongoing deliberation of how it will happen and what should be taken as something in relation to NDC or not. So that is something that we can. But very, very good points, and I would now bring in Kapil for his views on the same, and from the digital technology point of view, what is that you are thinking, and how Reliance is thinking on these subjects going forward.
So let me just cover, I mean, on a generation side, I guess Parag has covered everything possible, what we can do, especially on where we are putting up in generation. So let me just cover first what Parag just touched on, the manufacturing. Of course, the country is adding all these PLI schemes, which is what is going to drive the whole manufacturing within the country. And for the first time, we are seeing it's not only the manufacturing for the end product, but it is largely the backward integrated manufacturing. And they are really pushing for it by providing some other incentive. So take an example on the battery also. So we all see the solar PLI, given that now the battery PLI is also coming. So this whole storage, what we have been speaking for quite some time now, and we have all seen our dependence in the semiconductor sector, that we are all speaking for various fabs coming in India for a very, very long time, but in absence of providing reliable power, water, etc. Somehow some of those international players were not very convinced on bringing those fabs in India. But that's now happening. We are coming up with very, very large scheme for that as well. Apart from, so let me just bring on the whole manufacturing piece on the battery storage. So India has given a very, very valid PLI for the battery storage from a perspective that it is giving incentive for you to work on some newer technologies where you can figure out, you can increase the incentive by getting more number of cycles and by improving your energy density. So, and then there is a niche battery segment as well, for which also an additional thing is carved out. So, not only the present technology, but they're also telling that if you really want incentives on something very, very futuristic, it's available. But I would say we as a country have been thinking the whole storage more from a mobility perspective than as a stationary storage perspective. We now also need to see how and people have been talking of the secondary life of what the batteries are used in mobility. We will see how do we use it in the stationary storage. But time has come where we need to see whether we have time till the secondary life comes. And by that time, possibly the newer battery cost would be much lesser compared to the secondary battery part of it, what we are seeing from those batteries. So now is the time when we really need to see from a stationary storage perspective also, The other aspect I would say would be, we should look at it very, very seriously, would be the whole, we are designed as our Electricity Act that the electricity remain a concurrent subject. So it is a subject in the country which has to be addressed by federal or the national government and state governments. So the design is such that we just cannot have that we have one policy and which then covers and governs all the states together. So that's one aspect of it. The second is geographically we are so widespread that what happens in Mumbai compared to what happens in Guwahati could have a time lag of 1.5 years, whereas the watch still shows the same time. So, we can see that there the energy demand because of the daytime light, etc., could vary, and compared to, where we are sitting. So we also need to address those aspects if we are thinking from a nation perspective. So in this concept, I would say all of this renewable addition, forecasting, scheduling, and the use of digitization would play a key role, given that we really want to see where we set up the most of these renewable power plants. Now, we will not have, as why do we take a case of an VPP in some other country? We will not have land in, some of the parts of our own country. Whereas most, we have seen, wind, of course, by the design or the higher wind speed is, concentrated in few states. But solar also we have seen an, larger integration in Maharashtra, Tamil Nadu, Rajasthan, Gujarat, MP. So those are some of Karnataka. Those are some of those leading states where AP, Telangana. So those are some of those leading states where we have seen the capacity addition happening on the solar as well. Now, how do we see that the similar power is then available to other states as and when they need, and as and when they need, also to what extent they need? So this is on the other aspect of the full grid scale. Can we have the regional, like we have SLDCs, can we have the load dispatch centers each region, and then they are speaking to the national level grid and figuring out how do we distribute so that everyone gets their share, and everyone gets their share to an extent they need. So that can only be done when we really look at the whole artificial intelligence, and why digital and artificial intelligence is more important to see, because I really want to predict how much my generation would be, and I really want to forecast and see what is that I can dispatch, and then I really want to see at any given point of time how my demand will vary. Now, managing all of that is not a manual or a human interface problem. Now, this can only be done when we gather good amount of data and analyze that data and use that data to our benefit to figure out a solution for demand supply analysis. So why we are looking at it in a much larger level of grid scale, and small example could be a simple blockchain in the distributed generation. So what we have all seen in Germany, that I am producing on my own household, and then as and when I have a surplus power, I can sell it to my neighbor, or I can sell it to the grid, but I know at what price I will be able to sell. But at the same time, if I have a shortfall from my own roof, then I can figure out a solution to get it from my neighbor as well. So this whole thing, distributed generation, also can be connected in a blockchain, and then we can all see how do we support each other also, and then support the, like a very, very small area, and then that whole area then, and we are not talking islands. We are not talking islands where there's no grid. We are still talking community level engagements, which can then be done in this blockchain fashion. So we can look at it, the importance of this whole digital piece from a grid perspective. We can also look at this importance of this from a distributed generation as well. And if both works together, I guess we do have a solution in front of us.
Yeah, thank you, Kapil. I think taking back from the point of where we started the energy crisis, I think all of these are the building blocks which will be required for looking at the future, and so that we don't face such kind of prices. As you rightly mentioned, the grid scale energy storage. At one point in time, we did embark upon having the renewable energy management centers. So across the country, we did have those, and it's high time we operationalize those. The main idea was to actually gather the information coming from renewable energy projects and also to understand how they can be managed better. And that's, I think, that's definitely something that needs to be done from that end, monitoring and from a regional perspective, managing the grid, and also from the large scale BESS, which can provide that kind of energy as and when required for the future if there is any kind of shortfall which we see, so that the industries and the GDP and the whole country as a whole doesn't suffer because of these crises. The last element of it is also from the perspective of what we think is from what we think that going into the future with all of these aspects, how you think that the benefits will be passed on to the consumers. So we did have several of these good initiatives like direct benefit transfer schemes and all of which came in the aspects of how the act needs to be changed. Of course, today itself we all of us read that some of these have been repealed, and maybe in the near future it will not be. So, how you think that at the end of the day, and you talked about Kapil, you talked about how each rooftop owner also earned. So blockchain was not only did manage the grid, but it also was a investment instrument. At some point in time, we used blockchain also for investments into these small distributed, and we brought in Germany saw bringing in community-owned projects, and these can happen with a large country of ours. These can also be happening in the future, and that will bring in the ownership at the end use segment. Not only bring in ownership, but also bring in prosperity. And in a way, we are talking about distributing those and creating opportunities for everyone. So how you see the future panning out? And I'll come to you, Parag, on these aspects, and we'll end with it, and we'll go for question and answers. But over to you, Kapil, on this particular question. Yeah.
See, before I try and attempt the answer, Ashish, I would say everyone from an end consumer perspective, the main goal is to provide the green power at the most affordable prices. Now, take an example of a city like Mumbai. The green power is available, but you need to shell out more money for that. If you want to take some credits, electron is electron. What you get is, you can't differentiate whether it is produced from coal or whether it is produced from green power. But if you really want to get some credits for that, you need to shell out more from your pocket. That's how it is. So why do we project that green power is more expensive compared to any other regular power, what you were earlier getting? So we really need to reverse the situation from an end consumer perspective, that you can go green, you can get a solution, and at the same time, this would be the cheapest source for you to either generate on your own or buy it from anyone else or sell it to anyone else also. So, we have all seen different business models, and these business models in residential sector has largely not evolved in India for simple reasons, because first, the cost of residential tariffs in India is so low compared to the Western world that it is very, very difficult for companies to attempt to provide cheaper power with renewable compared to commercial and industrial. It's the other way around in the other part of the world. So we really need to appreciate the fact that the tail end of the curve is actually getting the cheapest source of power right now also. So we really, how do we see the benefit to the end client is right now also they are getting power at substantially cheaper prices compared to the industrial and commercial clients. if they really want to go green, we really need to see any kind of incentives, etc. government has seen. Now, even to the, I feel, on the whole, if we really want this adoption of the green in the system, then some bit of it needs to be incentivized, like we have seen in the Scandinavian country giving some carbon credits, or those can be traded even in retail, or putting some penalties on carbon penalties and as high as $200 per kilowatt hour as well. So, if that being the case, people would be pushed to see that it's not only the industries and the other larger people, even I need to see the kind of GHG emissions I am doing as an citizen of this country. So from an end user perspective, I would say this benefit would only happen when we figure out a different business model. It's now no more a game of reducing and keep reducing the cost of generation. We really need to figure out, we have given all possible solutions in different sectors. To the C&I sector, we have given RESCO model. To SECI, we have a model where an assured offtake exists. And all of this, as a result, we have seen, the renewable power coming down. Now we really need to see what business model can emerge for electricity as a service to the end client, which can then provide them the cheapest and the most reliable green power. So as in country, we can get to those level just by doing these energy efficiency program on a retail side. We are changing our LEDs, etc. is actually not taking us there. So if we really want to see as in country to achieve, first 2070, we have taken a net zero target. Most of the industries are already targeting 2035 to 2050. So they would play their role, and they have ways, they have teams, they have manpower, and they have bandwidth, everything available, which has started playing and revolving that wheel to see how do they hit between 2035 to 2050. But it will not happen till every possible citizen also start thinking about it, so that it can contribute towards, as a nation, where do we reach there. Some bit of a problem exists in the way our regulatory setup presently is. And you just spoke on some of those things which we were thinking can come as an amendment to the electricity sector. Electricity Act may not come, and it could still take some time by the time the act comes in place, or some of those new changes which are proposed can come. But I feel within the present setup, where it is a concurrent subject, we need to figure out a different business model which can then provide benefits to the end user. So it's just a matter of figuring out as a very, very large benefit to the end client, which doesn't need any incentives or push largely from government, but can happen if a newer business model emerges. And we all need to come together to create this business model. It will be, in joint efforts by state, central, and industries together.
Yes, Kapil, thank you for your inputs. I definitely believe in those. And over to you, Parag. What do you think about the emerging value pools, as well as what do the end customers, from their point of view, what needs to be done? Yeah.
Right. So I think, Ashish, the key is competition. So we have seen that in the wind sector, moment we moved from feed-in tariff to competitive bidding, there was a huge reduction in tariff, and at the end of the day, customer really got benefit from there. So similarly, if we think from a customer point of view, and whatever are the inefficiencies at the distribution end in the power procurement, and then finally transferring it to or selling it to the customer, if we can have competition there also, as Kapil was mentioning, then our sector will be far more efficient. Customer will get much better pricing. Everybody expected that this Act amendment will do that. And the way I read the Act amendment, it was that by now we have a concept of licensees. We call it a distribution licensee. The Act removed the word licensee and it introduces the word company. And what this act was saying, in any geographical area, any company can become a distribution company if he meets certain technical or technical, legal, commercial conditions being laid out by the regulator or whoever it is. So once you qualify, then you can become a distribution company of that area. The current distribution so-called licensee, and after the act amendment may call be company, has to share his wires to the new distribution company. And accordingly, anyone can sell power to the consumer, and consumer has more than one option. Right now, he's just tied up to one so-called distribution licensee. After the act amendment, it would have been possible to get electricity from multiple means. And we really don't know what is the amendment, how much amendment is really getting passed, what are the changes in that. But that would have been a really great scenario for a customer. Moment these amendments would have got passed. But having said that, many other things are happening, and that also is opening doors for renewable companies who can do solutioning. What I see is that this whole open access charge waiver, which recently last 2 weeks back has been done, is also adding to competition or a choices in the hands of a customer. So by now, only there were 4 or 5 states in the country where there was banking. There was some kind of a mindset, or it was commercial reasons also, that you can set up renewable plants only within the state, and that too in the states which provides banking. And there only a customer can have an option to convert from a distribution licensee to buying green power from an IPP. But now with this amendment, one can set up plant outside the state. He can connect to a interstate substation. He need to do solutioning. That is something which is very, very relevant. He need to improve the CUF on a specific megawatt by having whatever it. Some customers are asking for 80% replacement of their power, which means that you at the CTU end might have to have 3.5 or 2.5x of wind, 1x of solar, so that you reach to 80%. And then the extra 30% merchant power, you might have to find a new buyer for that. So you have to do solutioning. You might have to do solutioning using a energy storage system at your end. But yes, it has this regulatory change of waiving the open access has made it possible that even without a banking, you can supply renewable power through an interstate network to a customer. And at least it's not an ideal thing which we were expecting from Electricity Act amendment, but still it is a pretty decent way of reforming the sector, whereby you are, at least for renewable companies, you are giving some more options to sell power other than only to the distribution licensees. So I see that government is taking certain steps. Some of them we know because of this whole concurrent subject is not easy to implement, but whatever they can do by amending the electricity rules, I think in the last 4 months, there must have been 5 or 6 new electricity rules which has come out, which shows the intent of Ministry of Power and MNRE that whatever best they can do outside the constraints of amendment in the Act, at least that they are doing. And that really gives comfort to investors and the renewable companies like us that the opportunities for investment will increase. And coming to the point of storage, and storage is becoming very, very important because you have to do solutioning, and in solutioning for renewable power, which means converting infirm power to firm power, storage has a big role to play. The good thing that we are seeing is, as Kapil mentioned, the focus was more on the mobility side on the storage, but now we see an emergence there. Most of the people, even the large mobility guys, are moving towards LFP. They were earlier on NMC. And with this, maybe the cost of storage may come faster, may come down faster. And you see on the back of this PLI, on the back of everybody moving to LFP, Tesla also announcing moving to LFP, we see that battery becomes more viable and it may become a good part of this whole solutioning thing for the IPPs. So that is the way I look at it.
Great, Parag. I think we have close to around a minute. We will end this, end our panel, and we'll go for questions. Just to end the panel, I think we talked about climate risks and how we need to take care of those. We talked about business models, which can be, which can really change the way going things forward and reduce the risks for in us seeing any energy crisis which we have seen. And also we talked about the technology, digital and other interventions which can be really brought in to reduce those risks. And we talked about regulations and power markets which are changing, which are basically the pillars. These are the pillars to reduce how we see that, we don't, how we see the future, and we hope that such kind of crisis never comes into our lives. And definitely, I think from a perspective of all of these building in as levers to get to that stage. Now I welcome. So there are certain already certain questions, and I think one question is on can micro solar grids solve the upcoming energy crisis? Of course, we talked about the distributed generation, and Kapil and both Parag have already emphasized more on the aspect of micro solar grids help the open access solar market to grow. Of course, yes. There is one very interesting question. Are the big reinsurers like Lloyd stopped insuring coal-based power plants, and will this result into phasing out of coal-based power plants faster than previously expected? And that's a new angle to it. The role of insurance and role of role they played in thermal-based power plants, and what role they would have in future with the renewable energy projects and renewable energy players. So, Kapil, Parag, your views on that? Over to you. Yeah.
So I'm not sure about the insurers stopping insuring coal-based power plant, but yes, there will be a pressure on a coal-based power plant from multiple angles. If you look at any large ECB lender, whether it is Standard Chartered or a DBS, they have come out with the policy that by, let's say, 2030, they will stop funding any coal-based power plant or a fossil fuel power plant. And whether, so we see pressures coming from different stakeholders on drying up the source of funding for a coal-based power plant. Insurers specifically, I don't know about this.
Kapil, you want to take up?
Even I'm not sure if Lloyd's kind of reinsurers have stopped doing that, but at the same time, yes, the challenging environment exists for them, and I guess will continue to exist.
There's one more question on future for bioenergy in renewable energy mix in the decade. You want to take, Parag, you want to take that up, or Kapil?
Ashish, you are from the consulting industry. We all focus only on our areas of work. Maybe you can.
So yeah, sure. You have put me on the block. So yes. So definitely, I mean, there's anonymous entity who was put up that question. The bioenergy will have a very interesting role going forward, because we have all heard about even we have only heard about green hydrogen, but with bioenergy, we will have golden hydrogen. There's something called golden hydrogen, which is coming up. So from bioenergy, you can produce hydrogen as well. And that's one aspect to it. Of course, the technology and of course, the cost and all of that has to go forward. But from a perspective of today, what's happening, there is two things, which are biofuels as well as CBG. I think from the perspective of decarbonization, these two have the potential to actually negate. It's a minus thing if you use CBG in terms of your cars or anything, then you are basically it's not carbon negative. It's not carbon neutral. It's carbon negative. So from the perspective of that, using these biomass related energies is going to fasten the process of net zero emissions, and we are going towards that. So there is huge impetus on biofuels already from the Minister of State of Transport and Highways on using them. There is also a lot of emphasis on CBG. There is more than more incentives and more subsidies that have been given to large corporates to get into those. All oil companies, which at least I'm speaking to, they are all into going about thinking about how to blend. We are something like 7 to 8% as of today on biofuels. We are going to reach within the next 5 years, 6 years, we are going to reach 20%. So you have E20 engines from the automotive perspective, they are going to come in. And plus the entire change in the way gas distribution is happening from a GAIL perspective is also changing. All the gas CGD companies have been mandated now to accept CBG wherever it is getting generated. So you have these plants coming up as mushrooming all across the areas, and that can be at any point in time wherever there is a CGD distribution network. That is something that will be taking up that CBG. So there are business models, there are thought processes of thinking on how they can also reduce the natural gas consumption in India, and that's something that definitely will be one of the key things in the renewable energy mix going forward in the next decade. And we'll all see the decarbonization and carbon net zero going forward. That's all from my end. Yeah. So over to you, Gautam. I think we have completed the panel discussion as well as the question and answers. So over to you.
No, thank you very much, sirs. Such an insightful and engaging conversation, and a privilege to hear you all. And very well moderated, Mr. Kulkarni. Our guests and I have been hooked on till the very end and taken home several nuggets from today's conversation. I wish we had.
I hope you take in these inputs and also provide it to the government and in some places wherever.
Definitely. We always do that. We always market it to all our public policy makers in our platform who already exist as members on Blue Circle, and we will surely be disseminating to everyone as much as possible. And thank you to all our leaders in the audience for joining us and for staying till the very end and for sharing excellent questions as well.
Thanks, Parag and Kapil. Nice meeting you as always. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Bye, Parag. Bye, Ashish.
Bye.